So welcome to the third and final Create the Calm session, hosted today by Chris Brady. And we're so thankful once again to have you here to be wrapping it up today, talking about executive functioning, which, as we were just saying, is just as important for adults as it is for our kids. And so we're really looking forward to today's session. So Chris, over to you.
Great, thank you, and thanks everybody for time out today. Every time I know how difficult it is to make these times and to be here live, and I just really want to thank you for being here and taking this time. Executive functioning, I was saying for a few minutes ago, it's such an important game changer in everything that you do, especially if your child is also having difficulties with executive functioning. But it's one of those things when I learned about executive functioning, I was already working in the system. I was working in different special education centers in different high schools, and I didn't really understand, what executive functioning was all about. And once I learned this, it changed everything, because what we do typically, especially in special education, or when you're working even with adults who have a certain diagnosis, and they come to you with either an IEP or a psych ed assessment, and they say, okay, I struggle with anxiety or depression or ADHD or autism. All of these labels really overlap in the executive functioning difficulties. And so this is going to be such a game changer for you to understand, because regardless of what you yourself might be working with, or what you're working with for your children, it's the executive functioning that is really going to make the biggest difference. And when you understand it, you're going to really be able to approach the situations with your children so differently. Or a spouse. I work with a lot of people who their husband, definitely ADHD, and they're having difficulty because one spouse doesn't really understand the executive functioning difficulties around ADHD. And once you understand that, then you can start to build strategies that actually work. So that's where we're going today, and there's a ton of information. So I'm really sorry. I feel like I talk at you guys a lot. I don't mean to, so please raise your hand if you have anything. I always try to get in as much information as possible, because it's just so helpful to know. So if you're struggling with something, if I say something that doesn't make sense to you, just let me know, and I'll take a pause and explain it. So in today's session, we are going to be talking about what exactly is executive functioning, what does that mean for my child, how does this affect our relationship, and this is probably the biggest thing, because as much as we care about our children receiving certain academic scores and things like that, and understanding information, we're really more concerned about our relationship with our child, and this is a game changer for that. How do you currently approach situations, and why is your approach so important? And it's within those first 2 minutes that you are approaching the situation that's going to be where we really want to intervene. Executive functioning questions at home. So if I work with a lot of people who do not have an IEP, they do not have a psych ed assessment. A lot of parents choose to not, they don't have a diagnosis themselves because of, the time they grew up in. It just wasn't really popular. It wasn't common to get one. And many parents have chosen to not get a psych ed assessment for their children. And for whatever reason, it doesn't really matter to me. We can still work with the challenges if you don't have a psych ed assessment. So some really good things to start noticing at home, where you can say, okay, I'm pretty sure my child, has ADHD because it runs in our family, and I can see some of the struggles that he has that are consistent with it, but what are the real challenges and behaviors and needs that we can work on there? Instead of, having a diagnosis. It really doesn't matter. How can you what do you really want to control? So we are going to talk about control today. As parents, oftentimes we try to control the wrong things. And so we want to talk about control. And then how can you make successful, effective change through a better approach? So lots of information today, bear with me, okay? We will be opening it up to questions. So if there's something that, that you can hold off on until the end, great. And if you really want me to explain it, like I said, during the session, please just raise your hand and let me know. So what is executive functioning? So this is a pretty general, a generalized definition, but I think this is the best one that I can find. So executive function and self-regulation skills, and we can talk about what that means after, are the mental processes that enable us to plan, focus attention, remember instruction, and juggle multiple tasks successfully. So when we think about the ability to plan, the ability to focus our attention, remember the instructions that were just told to us, which, we know as parents that can often be a problem. And then juggling those multiple tasks successfully, being able to, switch from one task to the next, being able to do a couple of things at the same time. These are our executive functioning skills. And when we think about how broad that is, that's basically everything we do in a day. So that's why this is so imperative to know as parents. So the executive functioning skills, they depend on 3 types of brain function, okay? Our working memory. Working memory is extraordinarily important, okay? This is our ability to retain information long enough to manipulate it, okay? So oftentimes, especially in younger children, because some of them haven't had enough practice in being able to strengthen their working memory yet, but distractibility comes into play. When we give a child an instruction or a teenager an instruction, and then, we come back an hour later and say, did you do it? And they're like, do what? They're actually not hanging on to the instruction long enough for it to get into their longer term memory. And what happens then is that it just it leaves. So maybe they got distracted by something else and it took over. Maybe they simply just weren't, able to hold on to it long enough to do anything with that information. So typically, when we're able to focus on instruction and somebody says, okay, I need you to do 3 things. And we say, okay, I'm going to listen to this person. We're not saying it out loud, but in our mind, that executive functioning kicks in and says, okay, that means I need to listen to this person for as long as it takes them to tell me these 3 things, okay? And I'm going to try to hold on to this information so that when I leave them, I know what these 3 things are. I can remember them. I can carry out this instruction. If you're working with someone who has executive functioning difficulties, that is not going to happen. They are going to leave that conversation and not know exactly what you said because they can't remember it, okay? And so oftentimes we have a lot of parents who will say, oh, I'm constantly repeating myself. I always have to say the same thing over and over and over. Why do I have to tell you this 100 times? And that's the reason. And so when you know that that's the reason, it's not you and it's not them. There's an executive functioning difficulty. So all that means is that our approach, our method has to change. That's it. So it becomes like, wow, okay, this is something that I can control on my end. I can change my method. I can't change my kid. right? So this is why executive functioning is such a game changer. So the second type of brain function is the mental flexibility. So this helps us sustain attention or shift it in response to various demands, okay? And apply different rules to different settings. So that mental flexibility is all about how well do we adapt to different situations. We see this a lot in kids who have difficulties with social interactions, where we need to teach some social skills, and we might teach them something in a certain social skills setting, right? Like I work a lot with, you know, kids who can't really take a turn in conversation. They're constantly kind of speaking over someone else. They don't understand that they need to wait until the person is done speaking, because that impulsivity kicks in and they blurt it out, and they think, you know, a lot of times it's because they can't actually remember it for any longer period of time. But the real thing is that they're blurting out, and people get annoyed by that. But when they're in a social setting on the playground, they're very capable of taking a turn on the slide or on the swing, right? So we have the social skill taking turns, but what does that mean in different settings and in different contexts? And are they able to take that information and actually apply it into different settings and different contexts? We see this a lot also at the university or college level, when we get, you know, adult students who have come from years and years of social skills programs, but the programs often don't take into context college and university, because there are a lot of people that assume, oh, well, you know, that child has autism, they're not going to go to college or university. Well, that's a crock. I work with tons of people who have autism and are not only in college and university, but are the professors. So we really want to understand that, you know, when they get to that level, they also need to know how to navigate those social skills in a very, very different adult context. And then we have self-control, and this is really difficult for a lot of people, regardless of the label. So your ability to set priorities and to resist impulsive responses. So that's being able to, you know, also self-regulate your emotions. And sometimes people have difficulty with the term self-regulation, because so many people are not able to just regulate their emotions. But as we've been talking about in these sessions, I know that is a huge portion of what mindfulness can do. And this is, you know, definitely with ADHD and autism and executive functioning disorder and anxiety and depression, mindfulness creates that space for us to not impulsively react in our responses, but to be proactive and create a space between what happened and what we're going to actually say or do about it. So when we're talking about executive functioning and we're going through, you know, what exactly does this mean for my child on a daily basis, or for myself on a daily basis? So the ability to plan, organize, and remember. And those are the three, you know, all of the other stuff might be more difficult to remember, but if we can remember that they're having difficulties with planning, with organizing, and with remembering, okay? So every time that we create a strategy or technique, or we approach a situation with them, we want to keep in mind that they have difficulties with planning, organizing, and remembering, okay? And by remembering this, we can kind of curb our approach. So for those daily activities that might be affected, keeping track of time. This is really, really huge. A lot of our kiddos do not feel time in the same way that a neurotypical person does. They don't feel it in a linear fashion, like, I've got morning, noon, and night. They don't necessarily have a beginning, middle, and end to time. And so it's really important when we are structuring an activity for them, or when we tell them, you've got this assignment, you need to almost create for them a beginning, a middle, and an end, so that they can see the progression of that, okay? You'll also probably notice when someone has poor time management skills, they're often late. They're often late for meetings, they're late for work, they're late for school, they're late getting their stuff ready for the bus. The time management skills are pretty evident. Prioritization, this comes in really everything. Prioritizing what needs to get done first. I may have mentioned this in another session, but we get a lot of students who they really don't understand what to prioritize when they're in school. So, excuse me. So when they're in a high school setting and they're supposed to be taking notes, they really don't understand what to prioritize. What information should I be writing down right now? So what happens is they either write down everything or they write down nothing. And either one is not really helpful at the end of the day to them. So that prioritization, it's not just about, prioritizing goals or anything. It's all the little stuff too that we don't typically think about because we take it for granted that we're able to kind of do it. Paying attention. So it doesn't mean, I get a lot of people who say, well, ADHD means that they can't pay attention. Nope, that's not true. It's completely inaccurate. Please stop saying it. It actually means that they don't always have control over when they get to pay attention. They can pay attention very, very well. In fact, a lot of my clients with autism or ADHD can go into a mode of hyperfocus where they can pay attention better than anything else than one I've ever seen in my life. And they focus in on this, one project or something for days if they want. But the ability to say, okay, my teachers just said, hey, pay attention. That means immediately I need to pay attention. That doesn't always happen, and that's a problem, right? They don't get to just take control. Okay, I'm in the classroom setting. I need to pay attention right now. Inhibition, so the ability to not act impulsively all the time. If you're unable to initiate or complete tasks, we've talked about that one, especially in that last session where we talked about perfectionism. Sometimes they don't get started on a task because they don't understand it. Sometimes they don't complete the task because of different difficulties with perfectionism. The ability to make plans. So again, that can be a prioritization issue. It can be a sequencing issue. How do I make a plan when I'm not sure which thing goes where? Apply previously learned information to solve problems. This one's really, really important. If they, I've worked with adults who get into very difficult situations because, sometimes something will happen to them at work, and they got in trouble by the boss, let's say, and they know afterwards that, what they did was wrong, and they shouldn't have done that, and they go on with life. But later on, when that same circumstance comes up, they may actually do the exact same thing that they got in trouble for, because in that moment, it's almost like the impulsivity kind of just takes over. And even though, again, they'll remember after it's done, oh, I knew I wasn't supposed to do that, and I got in trouble again, or I got fired even. The ability to go back and really take that time to, okay, previously I learned this lesson already. I'm going to apply that information into this situation, and I'm not going to do that again. So again, that mindfulness that, if we practice, can create that space and the ability to take previously learned information and actually apply it in the immediate situation. Sifting out relevant information. So again, that's kind of note-taking and prioritization stuff. And preparatory processes, so being able to be prepared for things, planning out, what do I need for school today? What do I need for a specific class today? And having those things ready to go. So in a homeschooling situation, that might be huge because everything should kind of be there for them at, wherever they're doing their homeschooling. Their stuff needs to be there. Mm-hmm. Oh, Heather, I think thank you. So just making sure that, all of their stuff, like all of my kids' stuff right now, whether they have difficulties with organization or not, there's one drawer for each kid, and all of their homeschooling stuff stays in that drawer. A, because I don't have time to keep track of it at all, and I don't want to. But B, because they need to learn that all of their things need to go in one place so that when they get out into the real world, they have some organizational skills already. And they know this is where I struggle, so this is what I need to do to make things a lot more easy for me. Okay. So that emotional regulation that, so it's, we talk a lot about being able to express our emotions. And this is really, there's no limit for this. I'm sure you all know adults who do not express their emotions in the most productive way. And that can really cause a lot of difficulties in relationships because they have this emotion, they kind of blurt it out in an unproductive manner, and that's it. They don't want to discuss it, or they don't know how to discuss it, or they feel guilty. Whatever is coming into play, but our ability to express emotion is really imperative to learn. And I don't care how old you are right now, and you're lacking the tools. That's okay. We didn't learn this stuff. Okay, this wasn't a part of our school curriculum. We kind of grew up just blurting out different things, and you see a lot of fights in high school, and you see a lot of people getting really frustrated, angry, and holding in emotions. So we really want to learn how to express emotion in a healthy way that is going to be helpful to your kids the rest of their lives. Low self-esteem impacts practice dealing with certain emotions in context. So there's a lot of difficulties around emotions because if a child is not able to express emotion in a great way, and so they get into a lot of fights at school, or they push the kid, or they got into trouble or sent to the office, whatever it is, we tend to, as parents, say, okay, well, we're going to take away that play date, or we're going to, I'm not letting you go out for recess today. We have a lot of teachers who are still doing that. This is really not helpful and really deepens their inability to express emotion because they don't get to practice. They still very much need to practice, more so than other kids. And they don't get to really build self-esteem in their ability to express emotion or be social without having these, outbursts. So also, just really, really important. I can't stress enough how important it is to practice these skills. And I don't care, maybe your kid doesn't have a lot of friends. I totally understand that. And that's, your time or a sibling's time to kind of chime in and do some social skills stuff, some role playing. Sorry, I'm getting off target because I get really into these things, but these are all things that we will be talking about in the Facebook group. Definitely, I've already got it on schedule for next week, and we will be having free resources through my email. So we're talking about emotions too, how they affect learning, memory, and recall. So we talked a little bit about this in the last one when we touched on anxiety, and when we're feeling anxious, regardless of age again, our executive functioning and our emotional ability is hijacked. And when that becomes hijacked, we're not able to learn, not able to take on board new information. And if you are feeling anxious in your classroom, you can't learn the information that is being taught that day. So when you go, the next day and they say, did you do, this work, because we're going to add on to that. We're doing these math problems and we're adding on to that information we learned yesterday. I don't have that. I don't have that information. Where do I go now? Now I'm feeling even more anxious because I don't have yesterday's information. How am I going to build onto that? And so it just continues on and on and on. And we have to remember, if we're having these emotions and we're not able to express them in a healthy way, we are not able to learn. And that is so crucial to know. So talking about what your current approach is. And this is where, when I work with a child or a teen, I always work with the parent. And a lot of parents, right off the bat, they're kind of like, well, this isn't really my problem. This is my kid's problem. They're having trouble with this. And I say, well, here's the thing. It's really all about your approach too. If you don't have this information, you're going to daily be approaching this in the wrong way and just adding to the difficulties that they're having, because they're already getting the wrong approach at school. We know that. Unless they have some phenomenal teacher, and there are those too that we know them, definitely they stick out. But we've all had those teachers who didn't get the training or just didn't do it. And so we know the messages that they're getting at school, and what we need to do at home is, almost negate those messages from school with a better approach. And then we're also able to go to the teachers and say, this is the best approach for my kid, and here's why. So your current approach, where do you focus your energy? And for a lot of our kids, if you are focusing your energy on their difficulties, you're kind of, well, you're not good at math. We really need to work more on your math, or you're not good at reading. Really need to work more on that. It's not that I'm saying, we don't want to gain, get better in those skills, in those areas of need, but we don't want to make them the focal point. Because when we make them the focal point, our attention and our time go directly towards wherever we're putting our energy. And so we're constantly putting all of this time into something that may not ever get that much better, or to something that our child already feels self-conscious about. And when we constantly talk about it and make it like it's the most important thing, then we're telling them, this is the most important thing to us, so this needs to be the most important thing to you, and you're not good at it. So you need to focus your own energy on that, okay? And that becomes a really dangerous internal dialogue to have. So when we're thinking about where do we really focus our energy, and it's okay, there's literally no judgment here. We are all working on this stuff together, okay? And we're trying to figure out, okay, yeah, sometimes I do focus a lot of energy on that, but it's because I just want them to learn how to read or whatever it is. I completely get it. But I want you to think about what makes you the most exhausted when you're working with your child. And when we answer questions like this is where we can start to open up at noticing, okay, really noticing, maybe I am spending a little too much time on this, or maybe I'm spending time on this for the wrong reason. Or maybe I'm approaching this the wrong way. Because if I'm constantly exhausted by it, they're even more exhausted by it. And so we're not creating a good approach. So thinking about things like that, okay? How do you speak to them? As parents, we tend to say things, just go get me that glass of water or whatever it is, and we don't think about what we're suggesting in these kind of demanding tones. Things that we wouldn't say to another adult, but we do say them to our kids for some reason. And then also thinking about, what are the types of language that you use? And a lot of times when I'm working at a school and I hear words like, I've heard autism called a disease. I hear, constantly the word deficit. They have a deficit. They have a disorder. They have a disability. When we're constantly using this type of language, we have to understand the impact that must have on the receiving end. So really understanding, your language matters so much because it does eventually create an internal dialogue for the receiver. So, and do you know why they struggle and refuse? So when we're looking at our own approach, when we're looking at their response to our approach, are we looking at why? There's something going on behind this behavior, always. Behavior is communication all the time. So what is it that they're struggling with, and why are they struggling with this? Is it because they're not understanding? Is it because they didn't remember the instruction? Is it because they're embarrassed? There are so many kids who go to the office every day because they just want to get out of an embarrassing situation in the classroom because they don't know the answer. And that happens more often than you think. It's not because they're bad kids. It's because they're embarrassed kids. So really thinking about these things. And like I said, I'm sorry this is kind of long. I mean, I could do an entire session just on this slide. And we could really, kind of delve into these questions. But I want to give you as much to go home with as possible to really kind of reflect upon yourselves. So some other really good questions to think about, especially if you don't have a diagnosis. Even if you do, I mean, I really, the amount of psych-ed assessments that I've read, and then I work with the student and say, okay, well, did you know that you had difficulties in this area because of this? And they say, well, no, I've never read my psych-ed assessment. I say, okay, have your parents read your psych-ed assessment? Well, no, they haven't really either. We kind of just, we got it because we needed to get it, but we haven't really discussed what it means. And that's really, really common, like far more common than reading the assessment and knowing what it is. And I think because there is that component of not really understanding what to do with it, not really understanding what all of the different information segments mean. And then sometimes there's this refusal of, well, I don't really need information, or I don't really see how it's going to be helpful, or whatever it is, this is a difficulty. And if that's you, that's okay. But what we want to do is really start asking ourselves some questions, especially with homeschooling right now, because you don't have any teachers reading that psych ed assessment and saying, okay, well, this is how we can change this classroom environment. Hopefully you have teachers like that. But you have to now do this at home. So we're at whatever your IEP said, or we're living in a different time. You've got to now transition all of that information to a home environment, and with all of the additional stressors that you have. So really taking note of some of these questions, like how long does it take them to transition? And transitioning can obviously be huge. We're a large group of military families. We move a lot, and those are huge transitions. So we can definitely notice when it's a huge transition, but noticing when it's a small transition, like when they're doing something that they enjoy doing, like they're playing Lego, and you tell them it's dinner time. How long does it take them to actually come to the table if you only ask them once? And starting to notice things like that, okay? So if they're doing some math homework and then they have to switch to reading, what does that transition look like for them? Do they struggle to leave the task, and why? And so a lot of times they struggle more so with the tasks that they enjoy, that they're concentrating on, and they have a really difficult time switching and adapting to this new task, because it's when you think about even how you transition from something that you like into something that you don't like, right? And really building that empathy around, what does that feel like for me? So what would that feel like if I had even more of a difficulty with this? And really kind of, reflecting on that. Do they become anxious about larger transitions? So, when you know that your family is going to move, or if they have to change to a different school, or even, they're staying at the same school, they have the same home environment, but they're going into a new classroom next year. What's that like for them? And how much time before it even happens do they start to get anxious about it? How long does it take them to, how many times do you need to tell them to do something? So this is an interesting one when we're talking about, how much information are they actually able to hold in that working memory long enough to manipulate it, right? So just seeing, how many times do you need to tell them to do something, and what activities are you telling them to do that maybe take them a bit longer? Okay, it's all in this noticing. How long does it take them to process verbal information? So oftentimes our approach needs to not be verbal. We tend to talk too much, like way too much. And so this can be a huge approach issue too, just in reducing the amount that we speak. How messy is their room, and how much do they struggle to clean it? So you can even, I think the next one is book bag and homework. What do these things look like? How messy are they? When they come home with worksheets for homework, are those worksheets crumpled up in a ball at the bottom of the book bag? Are they thrown under, their bed once they get home to hide them? Really taking note of all of these things, what that looks like. What does their room look like? When you say to clean your room, it's a really broad instruction. If they have no beginning, middle, and end, they're not sure what that looks like. They're not sure where to initiate that task. Okay, so just things like that. Again, inform their approach. How easily do they get distracted when you're having a conversation? this is a really big one. This is something that they might struggle with for the rest of their lives, and really needs to be worked on, because whether or not you're having conversation with them, or their teacher is, or their boss is, this is something they have to learn to take in the important information from that conversation. Do they take notes in class? So we talked a little bit about note taking, and are they able to do that? Are they constantly distracted? Are they not sure of what note to take? Do they study for tests? And I put really, because a lot of kids say that they studied because they think that studying means reading over the textbook. But if you have a child with poor working memory, they're not remembering what they've just read. So they're just constantly reading over and over and over and over and over. And they think that it's studying because that's what it looks like everyone else is doing. So they're looking the part, but they're not actually getting any of the information to stick. Just anxiety, or have they ever told you that their mind just went blank? And this is a really good almost test to see if they're actually studying for that test. Because if they're getting a lot of test anxiety, I would say that they're either not studying, or they're not studying the way that their brain needs to study. Okay? So again, when we approach them about a bad grade, we're able to not be the grade and the consequence for getting a bad grade, but more about the method of their studying and how can we change that. So your focus becomes theirs, and I cannot stress this enough. Wherever you focus your time and energy and attention, that's what they're going to learn to focus on. So if it's always on their difficulties, on an inability to do something, that is where their focus will strengthen. And it will not strengthen anymore on their amazing talents, their unique abilities, their kindness, their awesome personality, their great sense of humor. Always remember where you are focusing. How you approach them is how they approach the topic in their life. So if you are approaching, school with a sense of frustration, and I get it, but remember, your approach matters so much because they take that emotion on board. So when you're constantly approaching academics with frustration or exhaustion right away in the approach, that is how they are going to see academics should be approached, with apprehension, with frustration that I have to do this, with thoughts of, oh, I'm not, oh, we got to do this again. Not with a sense of curiosity, not with a sense of, let's do this in baby steps, nothing like that. But those emotions really do shine through. Okay, so, thinking again about even bigger topics. How are you approaching those sensitive topics when they need to talk to you about something? And, maybe they've reached puberty, whatever it is. If you are uncomfortable with this topic, they see that. Okay, they really do. That shines through the most, and they will think, okay, this is an uncomfortable topic, so it's something that shouldn't be discussed. And be very leery of this, because you do not want your kid going to Google or one of their, same level of maturity friend and getting that information that is really important to the rest of their lives. And when you know this stuff, there are no more excuses. So knowing how to approach something because you have now some background information of where that behavior might stem from means that you don't have any more excuses, but it also means that they don't, because we're not going to have this constant battle anymore about about excuses or about difficulties. We're approaching this completely differently. And that is where you are going to have the biggest changes, not just in your homeschooling, but in your relationship. Okay, and I said we would talk just briefly about control. And again, I know, I'm sorry, I'm going through all of this really quickly. And again, we can go more into depth on this stuff in the Facebook group and in the emails. Control is a huge topic, especially when we're dealing with our teens, but learning to handle your own control issues at a very young age for your kids is going to make a huge difference. And this is also going to make a huge difference in any other relationship that you have. So we want to, again, we're noticing where we focus. Okay? What are you trying to control in these situations? So if this is a homeschooling situation, are you trying to control the behavior? Are you trying to control what your child is able to actually comprehend and learn? How many activities they get done each day? What the schedule looks like for each day? What is it that you really want to control? Your mood, again, we've talked about this, and your expectations, okay, and creating that space to walk away. So when you're approaching homeschooling with exhaustion, really remembering that they're taking that emotion on board, that they are going to reflect that emotion for whatever topic it is that they're learning about. And for you to just be really cognizant of your ability to create that space, okay? I have a certain expectation for today. What is that expectation? What does that look like, and why do I have it? What is the real reason that I have this certain concrete expectation of what they should look like? And creating that space to walk away and say, you know what, I'm going to express my emotions right now. I am going to embody what I want them to do. I'm feeling really exhausted or frustrated or whatever it is with this topic right now. I think if I take a few moments away and just do some deep breathing, I'm going to come back to this and we're going to work on this with a different approach, because I'm not able to approach this the best way because this emotion is kind of taking over. Okay, and being really honest, that's what happens. Our emotion takes over our decision making. Emotions should not make decisions, ever. They will be horrible, horrible decisions. So apologizing. This is a really big thing. A lot of people think, well, it happened yesterday, or it happened last week, or it happened last year. And I lost my temper, or I approached schooling completely wrong last year, and whatever it is, it really doesn't matter. Your ability to go in there and say, I lost my cool. I wasn't who I wanted to be in that situation, and I wasn't who you needed to be in that situation, and I'm sorry. And I'm really working hard to try to change this, because I don't really like when I do this either. It's just kind of this automatic response that I guess I have, and I want to change that. So I'm sorry, and I want to work on this together. Like that's going to blow their mind. Okay, the fact that you're able to do that and be very real with them and be a human being and say, you know what, we screw up too a lot. And when we do screw up, we apologize for it and we try something different. That's going to change the way that they approach those situations too. Oh, and sorry, I just want to see this question. What age do you start looking for these signs? You know, are you talking about signs in difficulty with executive functioning? I think it was Catherine. If it's something that you're already seeing, you know, I mean, we know that, you know, certain younger children, you know, well, all younger children are going to be, you know, they don't care about time, they don't care about transportation, they don't care about all of these things. But we do want to start a sense of, you know, caring for things. So, I mean, it can be as simple as, you know, we're going to pick up our toys together. But I think what you're asking is more, yeah, a couple of slides back for the, I know what slide you're talking about. I think I'm not sure. Let's take that at the end and really delve into that, okay? For the age limit, because to be quite honest, I mean, you can start this really at any age. You might even have, you know, a spouse that needs help with these things. Like executive functioning, really, it doesn't have an age limit. It's something that we don't receive a lot of practice with. So if you're noticing at a very young age, especially, you know, when they're socializing with other children, if you're noticing that they're having difficulties, they're acting out of emotion, they're acting in a way that is not going to be helpful making friends, you know, that's when we want to start working on some of these skills, even if it's just with, you know, that impulsivity. You know, if their first reaction is to push the kid because they cut in line, you might want to work on that, right? I mean, why not? So it's really dependent on what you're seeing. If they have a sibling, you can definitely see it more, especially right now where we're not able to socialize with other kids. But you, as parents, you know where your child is having difficulties. So really, you know, you're already far more capable than any specialist because you really do. And sometimes we don't think we have the tools. So I can help you with suggestions and tools, but you know where they're needing some help. And so we'll just work on that. What part of their life can you infuse more options? So this is a huge topic of control, you know, and I don't care how old they are for this either. They need to know that a portion of their life is controlled by them. And, you know, especially for teens have a really difficult time because executive functioning is definitely not up to snuff with, you know, an adult. You know, it is not fully developed yet, but we ask them to do a lot. You know, they're going to school full time. They have tons of homework. They need, you know, part-time jobs on top of that. We want to, you know, we're getting them ready for college or, you know, life. And there's so much going on for them, and they don't have a fully developed brain. You know, so we really need to remember that. And they want to be treated like an adult. They're still having tendencies to, you know, be immature in some areas. And so that's where we really want to create option. And like I said, this can start super young, but we want to make sure that they understand, you know, if you are not loving your math homework right now, okay, so I still need the math homework to get done because your teacher's going to ask for this, you know, it has to be handed in. This still needs to get done. But what you can control is how you do it, when you do it today, and maybe where you do it, right? So if you want to sit outside in the sun and work on this, okay. If you want to, you know, if you want to work on this with me, and you need some, no problem. I can definitely set up a time this afternoon where we can do that together. If you want to work on this for 20 minutes now and then finish it up this afternoon in 20 minutes. So it doesn't really matter how it gets done. The fact of the matter is, don't get caught up in the control issue of, this has to get done. It has to get done right now. Nope, it doesn't. And it doesn't have to get done in your way. And it doesn't have to get done in, this special little environment where he's not comfortable. You just have to create choice. And it doesn't matter how insignificant that choice is to you. Having choice in your life is huge. And it makes you feel like you have some control over the decisions that are made for your life. So make sure that you're making some choice. I had to do this with my 3-year-old last night. She was screaming about, she wanted to watch this show before she went to bed, and, and it was bedtime, so it's bedtime. But, what's some options? Well, tomorrow, why don't we could watch 2 episodes of that show tomorrow, right? If you go to bed now, then we can watch 2 episodes. And she doesn't even remember this stuff in the morning. She probably will tonight, but she got to choose. Okay, if I go to bed now, do I want to watch 2 tomorrow? Well, that sounds like a better option. So she gets to make that choice, and it immediately calmed her down because she had some decision in it. And again, it doesn't matter to me, right? It's still getting done. She's still going to be going to bed, but she gets to feel like she has control over that situation. How can your approach change? And this really is your ultimate control. Your control really comes into play on how you approach these situations based on the knowledge you have. So if you didn't have this knowledge before today, you may have approached things very differently. And we evolve every single day. So we get, new information that helps us approach situations better or differently. And so now, how might you approach something that you've really been struggling with? So, 1:59. I think that's my best time yet. So I'm open to questions or comments if you have something specific. But I really do want to put into play right now. The Facebook group is open. It is going to remain open. And starting next week, we're going to start bringing that over to an email list, because on the email list, I've started to create some resources that are going to be really helpful to a lot of the questions that have been coming up over the last 3 weeks in the Facebook group and in these sessions. So resources that, are going to talk about goal setting. Resources that are going to talk about tips for how to teach your children mindfulness, and you are able to learn it too, because we know we have to embody these things. So a lot of different information I'm working on right now. And if you join the Facebook group, or if you go directly to the email list, you're going to be on board. So you just go to chrisbrady.com, you can join the email right there, or you can join the Facebook group, which will be happening today, and then we'll be transferring all of those people over to an email list afterward. Okay, so I'm going to open it up. So I think Joanna's away for a moment. I'm going to open it up to any questions. So, Catherine, did I answer your question, or did you want to go back to that?
Yeah, I guess just a little.
And again, guys. Yeah.
Sorry, just a bit of clarification. So, like, my son turns 5 in the next week or so, and like, we're repeating ourselves all the time, and we have to, keep giving him guidance to do what we consider simple tasks. So I'm just wondering, like, how much of that to chalk up to executive functioning, I don't want to say issues, but to that, or it's, he's 5, so he's going to push back, and he's going to be a little bit protecting his boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think, at 5'2", it's kind of a great age to start doing this stuff because, regardless of whether or not you deemed executive functioning difficulties, all you're doing right now is you are kind of testing the waters to see how well he learns from verbal instruction or how well he learns from visual instruction. So it sounds like, okay, if you are constantly repeating yourself and if you are, kind of asking him to do things that you think, well, I don't really understand why he's not just doing that. This is a great time to start. It doesn't matter what the reason is. He's not doing it, whether he's unable to do it or he doesn't want to. He's not doing it. And so you need to come up with an approach that's going to work for him. And either you're creating choice and saying, that you've got these choices, you're going to tick off which one you're going to do today. And you have a visual approach, because I'm going to assume that if you have to constantly remind him to do something verbally, I would say verbal instruction is not best for him. Okay. And whether it's because he's 5 or because he has executive functioning difficulties, it doesn't matter. Let's just try a different approach. So I would say, a list, and it can be literally a piece of paper. But I bought these things at the dollar store like 3 years ago, and it's just basically like a little pin-up, almost whiteboard sheet of paper that you can use the whiteboard markers on, and I would just give them 3 things that I would like done today, and they could choose 2. And we had a certain time that things needed to get done, but they got to choose which ones they did, and then they have to come back and check it off, because what my one daughter really doesn't do well with verbal stuff, and but when I give her a list and she's able to read it, and we go over, okay, what does that mean when I say that you have to take out the garbage? What does that mean? That means you're going to take the garbage from inside the house, you're going to put it in the bin, and you're going to carry it to the top of the hill. That's what that looks like. And for her, we need to go over that instruction, because it's as simple as saying, that last thing when I said clean your room, that is such a vague thing for someone who cannot prioritize, or someone who looks at that room and just sees overwhelm. Because it's the same as us. When we feel overwhelmed by something, we just put it off, right? We don't do it. And we also don't know how to create baby steps in doing it. So this is a great time to teach them, what do those baby steps look like? What's the first thing that you need to do in order to clean your room, or in order to, whatever it is you're asking him to do? What's the first little step that you can do? And if you need to, write it down, because the verbal step didn't work. So write down the little baby step. Keep these instructions so that you don't have to continue writing these things out every time you need him to, clean his room. Another really good one for cleaning the room actually is by Sarah Ward, and she says to take a picture of the room once it's clean, so that they then have a visual reminder of what a clean room looks like. And you can have that picture up and say, okay, when we cleaned this room together and we took this picture, where did we start cleaning? What's one area, one little corner that we can start cleaning? And that is teaching them initiation, right? Where can I initiate this project? And just start to create a baby step towards that bigger goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Absolutely. Does anyone else have any any specific behaviors that they're working on, any difficulties. You know, again, this might be with your child, it might be with yourself, it might be with a spouse. It really doesn't matter. Executive functioning is a broad topic, all ages really. Okay, so I would say for everyone who's here today, the Facebook group is a really great resource right now. We're getting a lot of really great questions. Again, we're going to be creating some really awesome free resources that will start to be available as of next week. But it's also a really great place to contact me. You know, if you have a question that you don't feel comfortable saying in front of other people, you know, that's absolutely fine. There's really no question I haven't heard. So like there is absolutely, I love getting questions from parents. I love hearing about things that they've tried, and there is always a better way to do this together. And so regardless of what you know, I know you might be frustrated, you might think I've tried everything, please PM me in the Facebook group. Please, you know, join us, and if it's something that's, you know, more sensitive, just PM me, and we can work through it together, because really, you know, this can get so much better. I promise you that.
All right, everyone. Thanks again for joining. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.